What's up? Thank you for joining me today. We are on video 7. If you guys have not checked out the other 6 videos, please go back. We're going in sequential order. We don't want to skip and be confused. Go back, watch the other videos if you have time, and then catch up with us. So we are on video 7. The title of this one is Deep Consequences. And I mean deep consequences. Video 4, we talked about how there were consequences for the initial fall in the garden and how God had to punish everybody one by one. Here in chapter 7, we see where the sin of mankind has climaxed. What I mean by that is Satan began to try to keep the seed of the woman from crushing his head. And the way he did this was he put his seed into the women, and many women. And it got to the point where sin had pretty much taken over the earth. There was so much evil. God said that the thoughts, every thought man had was evil. And what I mean by climax, it had reached to a point where it was time for judgment. It was time for consequences. Because we all know everything you do wrong has consequences. So this is affecting the entire world. Today, let's kind of think about what's happening now. This is 2022. We look around us. There is so much evil. There is so much, when I say violence and vulgarity, the television is totally uncensored. Evil and violence has taken over the television. There's this cartoon, it's called, I guess it's Stewie. It's the little boy with the football head, the little football head baby with a pamper. He has a British accent. Every time you turn around, he cursing. But he is violent as all get out. Bad influence on adults. All adults, much less children. So you have the television just being inundated with all of this violence, vulgarity. We have women being kidnapped, sold into sex slavery. We have people being locked up in cages. We have people being thrown in prison that were innocent. We have people who abandoning their children. The marriage institution is pretty much turning into the divorce institution. There is rape, there's murder, there's incest, there's child abuse. There is so much going on to where evil is everywhere. It has inundated the world. And then comes along this virus. This virus called COVID-19. And they came up with vaccines for it and ways to try to slow it down. But every time you turn around, there's a variance that still affects people who have even been vaccinated. It's still taking people out that have not been vaccinated, but those that have been vaccinated are still catching the virus. As we think about all of this, could it not be that judgment is taking place once again? Could it be that the Lord Jesus is on his way back? I want to talk to you about Genesis chapter 7. And this is when God sent the flood to just totally human population and animal population and everything that breathed air. So here the flood, God has told Noah to take his family, his 3 sons, and their wives, his wife, and they are told to go and get on this ark that God pretty much showed Noah how to build, told him all of, he told him the features, he told him exactly how to build this ark. And when he built this ark, it was about the size of a whole football field and another half of a football field. It's huge. It's high, even though the Bible says it is believed that it's about the height of 7 stories or 7 floors. So there's this huge ship that had to be built by Noah so that he and his family would be saved from this flood. So the flood, before the flood comes, God, directs them to take 2 of every animal that is unclean onto the ark, and take 7 of all the clean animals, because those were the animals that would be used for sacrifice, and go into the ark. So they had 7 days to get all this stuff, get everything that they needed into the ark before the floods came. So they go into the ark, and guess what? God sealed them in. The Bible does not state how he did it, but we do know that once they were in and the doors were shut, they could not be opened again until God opened them. They had to be opened from the outside. And then there was just one window on the top floor that allowed air to circulate so that they could be all right and survive this flood, a deluge. So here's the thing. They go onto this ark, and we all think, oh, wow, I know they had to be excited. They were the only ones to survive, and they were the only ones to live. But what we don't really think about is the fact that even though they survived, they were probably in a situation where they weren't really comfortable. Anybody who's ever gone to the zoo, if you've gone near the elephants, you know the stench and the smell. Oh, it's horrific. It stinks. So I love going to see the animals in the zoo, but I could not stand going to the elephant section because the smell, you can smell it before you get to it. And then, can you imagine though, having all of these animals in a closed-in place? Can you imagine the smells? Can you imagine the things that they had to endure while they were locked into this ark? But sometimes you have to be uncomfortable to go where God needs you to go. God did not always say it was going to be easy. Well, he didn't say it was going to be easy, period. As a matter of fact, Jesus says that when you are a follower of him, that things will definitely be hard, that you would see, but you would endure hard times. And so here Noah is on this ark enduring hard times. And then we wonder, how does bad things happen to good people? Good people are not exempt from having hard times. As a matter of fact, because Satan is behind hard times, most of the time good people are the target of his antics as it relates to sending hard times. And so you kind of have to understand that here Noah and his family are on this ship. It's not cramped up because it's a huge ship, but there are so many animals, and they are having to, more than likely, they have to feed these animals. They have to make sure that everything is, I don't know how they clean the ship, but I'm sure they had to do something to keep the ship in a livable situation. Think that every situation was comfortable, in other words. If you can get the gist of what I'm saying. So they're on this ship and they're closed in. And guess what? You remember how it was for us when we experienced the quarantine at the beginning of COVID, where everything was closed and everybody had to stay indoors. And if you were with your family, more than likely you were okay. But then there were some people who were shut in and they were not okay because it became redundant. It became lonely. You couldn't see your older parents or your grandparents, and it wasn't a comfortable situation, even though the purpose of it was to keep everybody safe. So it wasn't that comfortable. And so now, if you can imagine 8 people And now, yes, it was eight. Eight, ironically, is the God's number of new beginnings. So there's 8 people on this ark getting ready to start a new beginning. So they are on this ark and they are closed in with all of these animals, and they are just waiting on God to do what he has to do as far as judging the world. Now, when the flood came, it rained 40 days and 40 nights. But mind you, the water came up to the mountains. The waters were so high that it lifted this huge ark off the ground, and it came up over the mountains. And it was so high to where even the birds were not exempt. The atmosphere was covered with water. But you have to remember now also that in the beginning, when God created the earth and he caused land to appear, he moved water out of the way and he called it seas. So I'm sure during this time, the water spilled back over on the earth. So there was nothing hindering those waters from the oceans and the seas from spilling over. So now you had water coming from the sky, from the rain, and you had the water from all around the land spilling over together. And so there's water everywhere. There's water everywhere. Just as the earth was when it was first created, when it was only water. But this is the judgment. This is what I mean by when I say deep consequences, because the water was definitely deep. And it destroyed everything that was breathing on land. Everything. Even the birds in the air. And this is because, see, Satan had infiltrated so many people that the entire world had to be destroyed. He had taken over people to the point where sin was just an everyday reality, just as it is today. Sin is an everyday reality. I hate watching the news because there is so much evil in this world. And it seems as if the news does not cover enough positive or enough positive situations. Everything is just evil. And so hopefully somebody who's in the news is watching this video right now. Please try to report something that's optimistic rather than having stories that are pessimistic just everywhere. So it's a frustration to me, so I don't really watch it. And it's just the sign of the times. So at any rate, they are on this ship closed in for over 365 days a year. For a whole year, they are on this ship. They are closed in, breathing fecal matter and all these everything else that goes along with it. And then after everything is died off, chapter 8, when we get to chapter 8, we will see how at the end of the flood what happens. But now up until this time, God has cleansed the entire earth of all of these sinful people and of all of these sins. And today we are dealing with, and not everybody, I can't say everybody is our sinful today, but we are dealing with so much COVID, and we're dealing with this epidemic, and we're dealing with the virus. And even if it's not deep consequences for sin, it does feel like judgment. Feels like a judgment is taking place. So as we go through the next video, please come back and visit. We will learn a little bit more about what happens after the flood. So from God Heals the Hurt Ministries, I hope you got something out of today's message, where we basically talked about how the judgment destroyed the entire world. but we still have a loving God that we will continue to talk about on the next video. I'm Teacher Gail with God Heals the Hurt Ministries. If you have not subscribed, please hit that subscribe and the notification bell, and I will see you on the next video. Have a blessed rest of your week. Bye.